Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Training Unleashed. I got to tell you, I'm super excited about today's topic. But before I do, on behalf of the Learning Network, I want to thank all of our listeners and watchers for being here. I want to thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio, and remind everyone, YouTube, we are on YouTube now, Training Unleashed Network. Okay, our topic today is going to be, do you need a Chief Learning Officer and NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And I've got the perfect guest for these two topics. His name is Jake Stahl. He is a professional author, a professional speaker, a consultant in the area of training. He is a fractional chief learning officer and an NLP expert. So we're going to start off with chief learning officers. Why do companies need chief learning officers? Why are they important? Why don't they just, have a director of training and be done with
it? That's a great question, Evan. And and this is all in my opinion, of course, but I think you need somebody to solve random acts of training. As a company, we get together and we put together all sorts of trainings, and you've seen it. We make trainings for different courses, but there's almost somebody that needs to be there to create that symphony of courses that just makes sense. A curriculum map, something that is coordinated with marketing and customer experience that just pulls together the whole gambit of training that you have to offer. And honestly, I've worked with companies where the training was held on personal drives because they were remote companies. So you almost need somebody to just say, hey, you're doing a good job. Let's fine tune this, tweak this, make sure it all coagulates in this spot, and just pulls it all together.
Makes sense. What do you think about the importance of learning or training being in the C-suite so you interact with the heads of all the departments rather than being an afterthought?
I think it's super important from the aspect that sales and marketing and customer experience tie together. But the piece that's kind of missing out of that is the training component. And I think with a CRO or a chief sales officer, chief revenue officer, you do get them that want to tie in sales training to their position, but it tends to take away from the other spots. So if sales training can be a coordinator between the operating officer, the executive officer, the revenue officer, and can act in conjunction and help the salespeople focus the message, having it in the C-suite makes it part of making the decision and guiding the company. And what's better to guide a company than training the people that are going to be the face of that company?
There's no doubt about it. And I think that there's a mentality, this is my opinion also, that most companies look at training as an expense where they should be looking at it as an investment. Literally, just before this podcast, I was doing an ROI analysis for a very large fast food restaurant chain. And they have, give or take a little bit, around 3,000 locations. And, we looked at, two numbers. One number was referrals. So if we could increase the amount of business just 1% through referrals, and if we could get the customers, this is all about improving satisfaction and consistency and quality. If we get our customers to eat with us from an average of 4 times to 4.2 times, and it was worth per year $80 million in not sales, but contribution margin to the franchisees, and $5 million to the franchisor in additional royalties. Yeah, those people not watching, Jake gave me a wow.
I gave him a wow.
And but people don't take time to really look at it that way. And that's why, to me, it's important that companies really execute, because programs fail. I'm speaking way too much because they're not properly executed. Could you, because I know you're a fractional chief learning officer, but I think this would help anyone who is a chief learning officer or wants to be a chief learning officer. walk us through day one. Okay. You got this now role. You've been, someone has hired you as a fractional chief learning officer. Surely they've given you an idea of what they want, but what do you look at? How do you start the process? What do you do in that role? And I guess sort of with that, do you have generally people already in learning roles in the company, or are you generally the one person show?
Usually when I'm brought in, the learning people in the company are managers. People have been there since day one and they train the new hires when they come in, or what they consider to be training of the new hires when they come in. So I haven't yet gone into a role where they have a full-blown training department and they're looking for somebody to just pull it together. Oftentimes it's a bunch of people who are all doing their own training and own departments, but it hasn't been formed into a formal unit. And day one, and sometimes Evan, day two and day three is interviews. I walk through interviews with all the C-suite. I walk through interviews with all the managers, and then I walk through interviews with all the people who are in need of getting trained. And I really take a lot of notes on what happens in those sessions, because my personal feeling is when you look at training, you have metrics, but there's a lot to be said for the live interviews with people and just getting to hear from the gut what they feel and what they've gone through. That just can't be captured in numbers.
No doubt about it. So you go in and you're basically, if I hear you correctly, you're going on a listening tour, right? Just another way of saying what you're saying. What's the next step?
So the next step after that is to see if it's true. And what I mean by that is if they have a sales team, I'll want access to their call recordings and their call stats. So I kind of take what I hear in reality and what they say, and then I compare it to what the reality is. So oftentimes a company will have Gong or SalesLoft or some other call recording software where I can sit and listen to some examples of what's taking place. And with the CEO, I can sit in on their town hall meetings. So it's almost like a verification if what I've heard is actually what's being done. And at that point, we start to draw up a game plan and we figure out what needs to be addressed first. What's our number one pain point? Is it that sales are just crashing? Or is it that on average, we're doing okay and we need to excel? There are sometimes, Evan, as you well know, being a trainer, that sometimes you need to go in and you just need to create a bonfire. And afterwards, you clean up the ashes and you start building a new wood stack.
So what environment is easiest to work at? A place that's got trouble, sales are hurting, they know they need to fix the ship, or a place where it's cruising, business is good, it's maybe not great, but people are satisfied? Would you rather be in the firestorm or the happy ship?
I think I'd almost rather be in the firestorm. I think there's an inherent danger that happens with the word satisfied, that it's okay, we'll improve and maybe we'll look for that 1% improvement. And to do that, we don't really need to do anything drastic or sweeping changes. So I think I'd rather go into a spot where they're all saying, listen, we've got holes in the ship and we're not going to stay above surface very long. And we really need to right the ship. There's more of an openness, I think, to suggestions and evolving what they're doing. Satisfaction tends to breed satisfaction and doesn't always foster the desire to learn or improve.
Yeah, I'd much rather be in a burning ship. I just think, when you're in a burning ship, everyone knows that you've got to do something.
Right.
Otherwise people tend to be defensive, protective, and that attitude, actually leads people to create a burning ship later. The
Right.
ship will burn at some point.
Yeah.
I want to shift to another question, and I know the audience isn't prepared for this question because I didn't put this in the intro. but you've actually worked in training in 6 different countries.
Yes.
And I was curious if you could just share a little bit about the cultural differences of training and what you have found in different countries.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, Evan, because really the 2 hardest things in training other countries are understanding their customs. And I read this book a long time ago. I don't even know if it's out anymore, but it was called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. So you kind of got a feel for what that culture may be like heading into it and how they prefer to learn. And then the other part is localization of message. So when you train people, as you well know, it's not necessarily the content you're delivering, but it's how are they hearing it? And is the city, state, country going to affect how that's heard? Here's a great example. As Americans, we tend to be uncomfortable with silence, right?
Yes.
And as soon as there's a silent area, one person's sweating it up and they're like, I gotta fill this. I found in Japan that up to 8 seconds silence in a conversation is not only normal, but it's considered respectful. And when you get little things like that from culture to culture, I'm not gonna lie, it's hard to adapt because you're overcoming things that you inherently know you prefer. So localization, learning styles, and just understanding the culture are 3 big challenges.
You know, it's interesting at the Learning Network, we do a lot of translation work. And when we have a client that really gets it, we're not translating the language, we're doing cultural translation. And that means that we're changing the actual wording to match the way in which the culture will receive that wording. And some, you know, it's interesting, like there's French and there's French Canadian. And if you live in Quebec, you don't want to hear your training in French. One, there might be some literal issues in understanding, but most likely you'd get it, but it's sort of disrespectful. But even like Spanish, you know, not Spanish, Portuguese. I was doing work in Brazil and Portugal. I'm thinking, well, it's Portuguese. It's not. Their cultural differences and how they talk. And the people in Portugal think the people in Brazil are brash and don't respect tradition. And the people in Brazil think the people in Portugal are old-fashioned and aren't with the new program. So you're dead on when you talk about the importance of understanding cultural differences. And it's very difficult to learn. Okay, I want to do another shift because this is literally like my favorite topic in training. You are a NLP practitioner. And why don't because I was about to explain it, but as you are the practitioner, why don't you explain to our audience what that exactly means?
Yeah, the foundation of NLP is simply that we all think, associate, frame a certain way. And the starting of any NLP training is understanding that we all communicate and understand in different modalities. They call it the VAK method, which is visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So it's understanding how a person thinks about themselves, how they communicate to others, how that message is received. And it talks about the foundations of why we believe that way. A lot of people think NLP is programming of the other person when you're speaking to them, but it's really understanding your own programming so you can become more efficient at talking to other people.
Hey, everyone, I want to take a moment and talk to you about the Learning Network. As you know, the Learning Network is a sponsor of this show, and I just want to tell you what a special company it is. Back in 2003, 6 learning companies were brought together and merged into one, a powerhouse, a company that literally, if it's in training, the Learning Network can handle it. I am so proud to be affiliated with the Learning Network and its team of learning professionals. Contact us today by going to learning.net and learn more about the Learning Network and how we can help your company go to the next level. I'm a huge believer in it, and I wouldn't call myself a practitioner, but I'm a practicer in my own self. You know, I think mindset is a form of NLP.
Agreed.
affirmations. And if you were actually looking at my computer, we've got 3 screens, and each one, when the screen's clear, has an affirmation on it.
Nice.
Because I really like it. I think in the 60s, NLP got a very bad rep.
Agreed.
And if you go on Wikipedia and you read about NLP, you would get nervous.
Yeah.
Because I think the original founders of NLP believed that you could literally reprogram a human being. You could take someone that was an introvert and make them an extrovert, etc., which I think no one believes today. But you can shift how a person frames their point of view so that they are happier, more productive, more effective. Do you find that?
I do. And I find part of it, Evan, is the understanding of where these thoughts are coming from. There's a great exercise in NLP that says, okay, what's your biggest pain point? What's your biggest stressor? And then it has you boil it down to what that stressor really is. So where does the stress today come from yesterday? And I will tell you, even when I went through the exercise, I was stunned at what the answer really was. And so, yeah, I think thinking about the way we think of things and the way we're programmed, and then understanding the way others are, I agree that the rap was pretty bad, but I think the evolution, and especially Tony Robbins being as huge of an influence as he is and an advocate of NLP, I think it's really changed the perspective.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm probably bringing this up and maybe tainting people, which I didn't really mean to, but I'm bringing it up because I think there are misconceptions that most of NLP is very basic stuff. And I am a fan of Tony Robbins' work. I've been to like 5 or 6 of his events. I've been through a bunch of other, transformational training kinds of programs. And, I think personal development is a very important part of my life, and I recommend it to most people. But could you maybe just share with the audience, and if you want to use me as a guinea pig, just sort of an example of NLP, and we can just role play a little bit?
Yeah. So let's try this then. So what I want you to do is close your eyes. There is a tree in a meadow. I just want you to describe it to me.
Well, the top of the tree is like perfectly cylindrical. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like somebody has manicured it with beautiful green leaves in full bloom, and a beautiful trunk, but like the first 6 or 7 feet of it, there's no what do you call it, branches, and all the branches are up top.
Beautiful. So you can open your eyes, and this is a short experiment, but your listeners can try this with somebody else they know. And if you just give them the tree in the meadow and you let them describe it, it gives you a great idea of what their modality is. So your description was almost exclusively visual. So you talked about cylindrical, you talked about measurements, a bottom half of the tree, and you were trying to think of the word for branches. So a lot of that was visual. So as a practitioner, if I'm talking to you and I want to bond with you and become a trusted person with you, I would use a lot of visual concepts. So if I'm working with you as a business owner, I may say to you, so Evan, what does success look like to you? When you see a customer, what do you look for? So I would use all very visual references. And I've had clients that have said, I hear the wind blowing through the leaves and I hear the trickle of the stream behind it, even though I didn't say there was a stream, but they create it and they create that auditory connection. So since the whole foundation, again, as you're acutely aware, the whole foundation of training or getting people to like you is it's becoming like them. Our favorite topics are us. So if we can see somebody that's like us, we tend to favor them more and trust them more. So the more I can reflect your language and your body posture, the larger the trust we're going to build and the more fruitful the relationship.
No doubt about it. And I do think, to your point, understanding how other people are thinking and feeling is really, really important. I was today with a coaching client of mine who had a rough experience. And I said to him, just put yourself in the mind of the person that was giving you a hard time. What were they going through? Why were they acting that way? What was their childhood like? And when you can have empathy, is really cool. So I love that experiment. That's cool. I'm going to try it with my wife and see what she says.
It's funny how much it reveals to you, because I've done this with people already that have gone on a 10-minute diatribe. And that's fine. You can take that leash and run to the end of it. I'm okay with that. But if you take seriously the modalities that they use, and there can be a couple, keep in mind, there may be one primary, but they'll probably have a secondary and tertiary. And you start to use that more in the conversation, or let's say your wife turns out to be visual as well. She may respond to gifts that are more visually appealing. So she may like a diamond or roses. And so it's amazing how if you just take that and run with it, what a difference it makes in the communication with somebody else. And you can apply this to public speaking, training, whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, as you know, a good public speaker has to hit every modality because the room is full of every modality.
Correct.
So and that's part of the art of public speaking.
Yeah.
So Jake, this has been a very interesting conversation. I am sure that some of our speakers would love to know more about you and what you do. You have a great offer, so I want to encourage everyone to hang for the offer. And of course, we're going to get your one best tip. So Jake, tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, who are the people that should reach out to you?
Sure. Thanks, Evan. My experience is 30 years in training and development. As you stated earlier, I've done it in 6 different countries, probably over 10,000 people. It's just a guess. I've spoken in 47 of the 50 states on training and advanced adult learning principles. I have my master's certification in NLP. And the people who reach out to me fall into one of 3 buckets. First, they don't have a training development program at all. And they really need somebody to just come in, set it up and get it running. And then when I leave, they have kind of a turnkey. The second is they have a sales team that has been using sales scripts and they're just not hitting it home. And they need somebody who can relate with customers quickly, easily, and adapt on the fly. And the last person who gets in touch with me is somebody who wants to get past boundaries. They have imposter syndrome, or they're having trouble selling themselves as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And they contact me and we do some NLP sessions together to try and get them through it. But those are the 3 people that usually pick up the phone.
I will just give a plug for NLP sessions. I've done a lot of work with NLP and it's truly life-changing. Think about some of the baggage you have as chains on the body and releasing those chains. I mean, it really is incredibly powerful. How do people reach you?
I have 2 spots you can get me at. I have a spot on LinkedIn, like we all do. It's Jake Stahl. There's probably 100 Jake Stahls, but there's only one that looks like this. And then I have a website.
Just so you know, Jake, as you point to yourself, most of our
some people don't
our listeners. He has glasses, nicely cut hair, a little salt and pepper, and a great smile.
Thank you. Yes. So you can look for my description as fractional chief learning officer as the first part of the intro.
Yeah.
The second spot is jakestahlconsulting.com. You can reach me on my website.
And how do you spell Stahl? And I'm looking at it, so I know, but our listeners.
Good point.
So if you would spell your website.
Sure. It's Jake, Jake. Last name is Stahl, Stahl, consulting.com. And to dispel the myths, it's not a German last name. It's actually Romanian.
All right. I just wanted to let the audience know I checked. He's not related to Leslie.
No, most common question I get, no relation.
Jake, I know you have a really good offer. If you wouldn't mind sharing the offer to everyone in the audience, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so anybody in your audience, Evan, that wants to reach out and say they heard me here, I'll give you a 1-hour free consult, whether it's NLP, you're looking to improve your training, you're looking for instructional design techniques, anything that walks down the training or NLP path, I'll give you an hour free of my time. And if I can help you, I will promise you I will connect you with someone who can.
Well, that is a fantastic offer. You know, we have people that offer time, but they're offering 15 minutes, 30 minutes, a full hour of your time is very generous, and I appreciate it. And Jake, as the audience well knows, we always end the show with, if you have one tip to share, what would that one tip be?
My biggest tip would be, if you want to bond with somebody quickly, don't say anything but ask them questions about themselves, because that's when the magic happens. The more I talk about you, Evan, the more you want to talk about me. Eventually, you're going to ask, Jake, I've talked a lot about me. Tell me about you. So my biggest suggestion, even in training, selling, public speaking, make it about the person you're talking to and not about yourself.
Add to that dating. Although I'm happily married for 31 years.
Good point.
But I do remember from my dating days, it was always get her to speak. Jake, thank you. On behalf of the Learning Network, thank you for being a guest. I want to thank all the audience and people listening very much. Thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. And see how great Jake looks by going to YouTube and going to Training Unleashed Network, or going to C-Suite TV and checking the show out there. Everyone have a great day.